Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Back with some more Behind the Battles of the American Civil War. After taking, not a couple weeks off, but a couple weeks off of profiles, we're back on the profiles with
Styling and profiling.
the
The hero of the Union.
the second most important guy of the Civil War, I guess you would say, behind Abraham Lincoln himself, is old Ulysses S. Grant, a nobody,
The old drunkard himself.
a legitimate nobody
Yep.
until 1863.
I don't even think he did that well in West Point.
Well, no, he was a nobody, basically flat broke.
Right.
After, we'll get into it. We already, he was a flat brokered, down on his luck, drunk.
Scottish, huh?
Got reprimanded a couple times at his days after West Point in the Mexican-American War and shit like that from being a little drunk.
There was a couple of battles where he used to sit next to trees and eat biscuits and drink whiskey and fall asleep.
Well, that was Stonewall Jackson, but yeah.
Was it Stonewall?
Yes.
Either way.
They're one in the same.
They're one in the
We
same.
got Ulysses S. Grant. This one's going to be a two-part. I tried to make it a one-part, but there's just literally no way. So we're going to do, first part's going to be his early life, his first foray into the military, the Civil War stuff, and his run-up to presidency. And then the next part's going to be his presidency and the end of his life. So, and they're both pretty long. So there's no way I was doing 4 parts on this guy.
We just have to do dos amigos.
Especially, it's only because he was president. That's why there's so much shit. Like the second part's just crazy about the stuff that happened during his presidency. Yeah,
he picked a bad time to be president.
Yeah, especially during Reconstruction and all that shit, and lots of new stuff coming into the United States. So we'll get to that next week. But first, he was of English and Ulster Scots ancestry.
Nice.
His immigrant ancestor Matthew Grant arrived with the Puritans from England in the 1630s.
Oh, fantastic.
Grant's paternal great-grandmother, Susanna Delano, French origin, was the granddaughter of Jonathan Delano, who lived, who cares? He was the seventh child of Philippe de Lannoy. Philippe was descended from the illustrious house of Lannoy and was one of the Fortune's passengers who landed at Plymouth in November 1621.
Fantastic.
Joining the first settlers of the Mayflower.
Nice.
Oh, wow. The offspring of the paternal uncle of Susanna, Thomas Delano, born in 1704, gave a few decades later another president of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Look at that shit.
Wow.
Wow. Nice lineage there. Ulysses S. Grant.
I had no idea.
Fantastic.
His mother descended from Presbyterian immigrants from County Tyrone, Ireland, where the ancestral family home still stands in Ballygawley. They moved to Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Look at that shit.
Oh, Pennsylvania.
Hiram Ulysses Grant was born in Point Pleasant, Ohio.
Yeah, that's another thing. His middle name's Ulysses. There's no S.
Yeah, that's weird. I always thought that was weird.
Well, we'll get to how he got that.
Hiram Ulysses Grant was born in Point Pleasant, Ohio on the 27th of April, 1822. Point Pleasant, located in the southwestern corner of Ohio near Cincinnati, pretty much Kentucky. His father, Jesse Root Grant, he lived from 1794 to 1873. Oh, good for him. He was a self-reliant tanner and businessman. Oh, he tanned hides, huh? His mother, Hannah Grant, was born 1798, 1883. Good for her. Look at these long and living Grants.
He died not too long after. Yeah, about 10 years.
Grant was Jesse's and Hannah's first child. Both Jesse and Hannah, they were natives of Pennsylvania. Fall 1823. Family moved to the village of Georgetown in Brown County, Ohio, where they had 5 more kids. At the young age of 5, old Ulysses began his formal education, starting at a subscription school, and he later was enrolled into 2 private schools.
Private schools. Now, in the winter of 1836-37, Grant was a student at Maysville Seminary, and in the autumn of 38, he attended John Rankin's Academy.
Nice.
Raised in a Methodist family devoid of religious pretentiousness, Grant prayed privately and was not an official member of the church.
That's how you should do it.
Unlike his younger siblings, Grant was never disciplined, baptized, or forced to attend church by his parents.
Wow. First child, right? Firstborn.
One of his biographers suggests Grant inherited a degree of introversion from his reserved, even uncommonly detached mother. She did not visit the White House during her son's presidency at all.
Okay.
At home, Grant assumed the duties which were expected of him as a young man. and they primarily included maintenance of the firewood supply.
Makes sense.
He thereby developed a noteworthy ability to work with and control horses, which were in his charge.
Right.
And he used it to provide transportation as a vocation during his youth.
Makes sense.
I mean, obviously.
All right. Take a look at his time at West Point. 1839 to 1843. He spent 4 solid years there. Age 17, help of his daddy, Grant, nominated for a position at the United States Military Academy. This is in West Point, New York. He was nominated by Congressman Thomas L. Hamer. Hamer mistakenly nominated him as Ulysses S. Grant of Ohio. Mm-hmm. Okay. At West Point, he adopted this very name, but only with the middle initial. Among his Army colleagues at the academy, his nickname became Sam, because the initials U.S. also stood for Uncle Sam. Mm-hmm. The S, according to Grant, did not stand for anything, though Hamer had used it to abbreviate his mother's maiden name. Oh, his mother's
Simpson.
maiden name. Oh, okay.
Well, the influence of Grant's family brought about the appointment to West Point, while Grant himself later recalled that a military life had no charms for me.
Okay.
Grant, he stood a mere 5'1", weighed 117 pounds when he entered West Point. Ooh. He later said he was lax in his studies, but he achieved excellent grades in mathematics and geology.
All right.
Although Grant had a quiet nature, he did establish a few intimate friends at West Point, which included Frederick Tracy Dent and Rufus Ingalls. Laura Ingalls?
All right.
He joined a fraternity group known as the 12 and 1 and was highly esteemed by his classmates.
Fantastic. Look at this guy. A little frat boy, huh? Well, he did not excel in school. Grant studied under romantic artist Robert Walter Weir, and he produced 9 surviving artworks. Oh,
Really?
okay. He also established a reputation as a fearless and expert horseman.
He did.
Setting an equestrian high jump record that stood for almost 25 years, he did. He graduated in 1843, ranking 21st in the class of 29.
Hey, man, not everybody can be up there.
Grant, he later recalled that his departure from West Point was of the happiest times and that he had intended to resign his commission after serving the minimum term of obligated duty. He was like, yeah, screw this military bullshit.
Look good on the resume.
Right. Despite his excellent horsemanship, he was not assigned to the cavalry, as assignments were determined by class rank, not aptitude. Yeah, but you got to be better. Grant was instead assigned as a regimental quartermaster, managing supplies and equipment in the 4th Infantry Regiment, with the rank of brevet 2nd lieutenant. That's not bad.
Well, Grant's first assignment after graduation took him to the Jefferson Barracks near St. Louis, Missouri. After recuperating from an illness that left him thin and weak, Grant reported there in September of 1843.
Damn.
It was the nation's largest military bastion in the West, commanded by Colonel Stephen Kearny. Oh.
All right.
Grant was happy with his new commander, but still looked forward to the end of his military service.
Yeah.
During this period, Grant had entertained the idea of becoming a mathematics teacher following his military service and spent much of his free time studying advanced algebra, geometry, and trigonometry.
Damn.
This dude loved he's a nerd.
Fantastic.
Grant, he then
That's
spent
probably
some of
why
his-
he was so good at countering Lee.
Yeah, because it took trigonometry, that's for sure.
Yeah. Geometry.
Sure.
Algebra. A equals B squared or some shit.
Grant, he spent some of his time in Missouri visiting the family of his West Point classmate, Frederick Dent, and getting to know Dent's sister, Julia. The two, they became secretly engaged in 1844. Nobody knew it.
Rise in tensions with Mexico saw Grant's unit shifted to Louisiana
Louisiana.
later that year as part of the Army of Observation under Major General Zachary Taylor, future president. President James K. Polk, he said, Taylor, I want you to go south to force that Mexican government to bargain over disputed territory between the U.S. and Mexico, which is mostly Texas and North New Mexico and Arizona, parts of California, Nevada.
Well, considering, yes, this is everything that borders Mexico.
Well, that was Mexico.
Yes. The Gadsden Purchase.
Grant, he was in charge of securing hundreds of mules in preparation for the move south. He purchased the mules from Mexicans.
Oh, shit. He said, hey, Mexicans, we're going to purchase these from you to go take your land.
Right, and had the mules branded, but the mules resisted being broken to wear a saddle in the pack. Major General Taylor took notice of Grant when Grant jumped into the water to help his men remove oyster beds so ships could advance from Aransas Bay to Corpus Christi, saying he wished he had more officers like Grant.
Oh, good for you. He just wanted
Look
to
what
eat
he
some
did.
oysters.
He just went in there.
He was hungry.
Right.
March 11th, 1846, Grant's 4th Infantry, part of the 3rd Brigade, left Corpus Christi, first traveling west and then veering south.
All right.
Having reached Rio Grande, both the Mexican and American armies spied on each other.
Damn right they did.
On April 25th, the Mexican-American War broke out when Mexican troops fired on and killed 11 American troops, commanded by Captain Seth Thornton at Rancho de Carricitos.
Oh,
Defending Fort Texas on the Rio Grande, Taylor's army advanced on Palo Alto and Resaca de la Palma. Uh-oh.
here comes Grant's first ever battle experience. Battle of Palo Alto. This was against a substantial Mexican force that intended to flank and attack the American army. They wanted to end them.
Of course.
Put them out, boys. Grant, he said, I'm not going to panic, and he did it. He readied his 1822 musket when Taylor ordered 2 large artillery guns that fired on the Mexican army, who retreated at that time. The very next day, the American army followed the retreating Mexican army to Resaca de la Palma. Not content with his responsibilities as quartermaster, Ulysses said, you know what? I want to make my way to the front lines. I'm going to engage in battle, baby. And he did that, and he participated in the Battle of Resaca de la Palma. He led his company in a charge, capturing a Mexican officer and a few of his men as well. This is Ulysses S. Grant's first victory. Grant later realized the ground he gained and his captives had earlier been won in the battle.
Well, crossing the Rio Grande, the United States Army continued to advance into Mexico.
Oh, shit.
Thousands of American volunteers were incorporated into the U.S. military, serving alongside the regular army, including Thomas Hamer, who had nominated Grant to West Point.
Look at that shit.
Starting in September, Taylor and his army of invasion moved south and engaged the Mexican army at the Battle of Monterrey.
Damn.
During the battle, Grant demonstrated his equestrian ability, carrying a dispatch through Monterrey's sniper-lined streets on his horseback while mounted in one stirrup.
Oh, no shit.
He was like on the side.
Damn, look at this guy. Look at this guy. He's freaking...
He was like hanging off the side so maybe he wouldn't get shot.
President James Polk, who was wary of Taylor's growing popularity, divided his army. What a piece of shit. Sending some troops, including Grant's unit, to form a new army under Major General Winfield Scott. Scott's army landed at Veracruz and advanced toward Mexico City. Here we go.
Yeah, we went all the way down there.
Damn. The army met the Mexican forces at the battles of Molino del Rey and Chapultepec. This is outside Mexico City. At the latter battle, which is Chapultepec, Grant dragged a howitzer into a church steeple to bombard nearby Mexican troops. Damn, he dragged a howitzer by himself? Holy shit.
Into the steeple?
Damn. Scott's army was soon into the city, and the Mexicans agreed to peace not long after.
They're like, all right.
They're like, oh, wait, you guys actually are going to fight. Shit.
In his memoirs, Grant...
So basically, we could have took over Mexico City if we really wanted.
Mexico City, and we would have had way down there, but who would have wanted that? In his memoirs, Grant indicated he had learned extensively by closely observing the decisions and actions of his commanding officers, particularly admiring Taylor's methods, and in retrospect, he identified with Taylor's style.
Nice.
At the time, he felt that the war was a wrongful one because he believed that territorial gains were designed to spread slavery throughout the nation.
Oh, wow.
He wrote in 1883 that I was bitterly opposed to the measure, and to this day, I regard the war, which resulted, as one of the most unjust ever waged by a stronger nation against a weaker nation.
It's true.
He also opined that the later Civil War was inflicted on the nation as punishment for its aggression in Mexico. Like some kind of divine power that was like, hey, we're going to make you guys have a civil war because you wanted to take over Mexico. I don't think it works like that.
Yeah. August 22nd, 1848. 4-year engagement. Grant and Julia married. He and Julia would go on to have 4 children. Frederick Dent Grant, Ulysses S. Grant, they call him Book, Ellen Renshaw Grant, they call her Nellie, and Jesse Root Grant, the second. Whoa, who's the first? His grandpa? The couple corresponded during his service in Mexico. In one letter, Julia shared with him a very pleasurable dream she had of him in a beard, which he was then sporting upon his return after the war.
He's like, yeah, this is going to see me in this beard.
Ooh. All right, she's like, yeah, I don't like it.
He's like, I'm going to plant my seed.
She's like, you remember John?
Right.
Yeah.
Although Grant received promotions during the Mexican-American War, the peacetime army offered little for a young officer's advancement.
Right.
Lieutenant Grant was assigned to several different posts over the ensuing 6 years. His first post-war assignments took him and Julia to Detroit, and then Sackett's Harbor, New York.
Damn.
The location that made him the happiest. Spring of 1852, he traveled to Washington, D.C., in a failed attempt to prevail upon the Congress to rescind an order that he, in his capacity as quartermaster, reimbursed the military $1,000 in losses incurred on his watch, for which he bore no personal guilt.
Oh, look at them.
They're saying he owed $1,000.
Oh, I thought he went there to be like, hey, bud.
No.
Yeah, I cost you guys $1,000.
Jeez. Well, he was then sent to Fort Vancouver in the Oregon Territory.
Damn, they sent him all the way up there.
Initially landed in San Francisco during the height of the California Gold Rush. So pan a couple rivers before you get head up there.
Holy shit. Like, where can we send this motherfucker?
He's asking, he's doing too much now.
Julia could not accompany him as she was 8 months pregnant with their second child. She didn't want to go there anyway. Further, a lieutenant's salary would not even support a family on the frontier. The journey proved to be an ordeal due to transportation disruptions, an outbreak of cholera within the entourage while traveling overland through Panama. Grant made use of his organizational skills, arranging makeshift transportation. He had hospital facilities to take care of the sick, and also he arranged. There were 154th Infantry fatalities, including Grant's longtime friend, John Gore. After Grant arrived in San Francisco, he traveled to Fort Vancouver, continuing his service as quartermaster. The United States military was to keep the peace in the Pacific Northwest between settlers and Indians. Good luck. And this was in the aftermath of the Cayuse War.
On assignment out west and in an effort to supplement a military salary inadequate to support his family, Grant, he assumed his work as quartermaster, so equipped him, attempted but failed as several business ventures. He's like, nothing, I got to do some side work here.
Right.
The business failures in the West confirmed Jesse Grant's belief that his son had no head for business, creating frustration for both father and son.
Son of a bitch.
In at least one case, Grant had even naively allowed himself to be swindled by a partner.
Oh, man.
These failures, along with the separation from his family, made for quite an unhappy soldier, husband, and son.
That's when the alcohol came in.
Rumors began circulating that Grant, he was drinking in excess. Drinking on the job.
You ain't kidding.
Drinking to feel.
Summer of 1853, Grant promoted to captain, one of only 50 on active duty. Then he was assigned to command the Company F, 4th Infantry at Fort Humboldt on northwest California coast. At least he got to go back to Cali. Without explanation, he shortly thereafter resigned from the Army on July 31st, 1854. Wow. The commanding officer at Fort Humboldt, Brevet Lieutenant Colonel Robert Buchanan, a strict disciplinarian, had reports that Grant was intoxicated off duty, but while he was being seated at the pay officer's table. Oh, you can't do that, right? Buchanan had previously warned Grant several times, said, you need to stop drinking, boy. In lieu of the court-martial, Buchanan gave Grant an ultimatum to sign a drafted resignation letter. It's like, you either quit drinking or you got to go, bud. Grant's like,
well, Grant said, all right, I resign. The War Department stated on his record, nothing stands against his good name.
oh, okay.
Rumors, however, persisted in the regular army of Grant's intemperance. According to biographer McFeely, historians overwhelmingly agree that his intemperance at the time was a fact, though there are no eyewitness reports proving this.
I'm sure there were times where he flipped out.
I'm sure he was drunk, passed out a time or two.
Yeah, what are you going to do?
Two of Grant's lieutenants corroborated this incident, and Buchanan confirmed it to another officer in a conversation during the Civil War.
All right.
Historian Jean Edward Smith, or Jean, he says the story rings true.
Ooh.
He also maintains Grant's resignation was too sudden to be a calculated decision.
Right.
Yeah, they kicked him out, man.
It's over with. Historian William McFeely, he said that Grant left the Army simply because he was profoundly depressed, and that the evidence as to how much and how often Grant drank remains elusive.
Oh, just quit kind of trying to cover up for him. Jeez.
Buchanan never mentioned it again until asked about it during the Civil War. The effects and the extent of Grant's drinking on his military and public career are debated by historians. I don't care what historians think or debate. Lyle Dorset said Grant was an alcoholic, but functioned amazingly well.
Functioning alcoholic, man. William Farina, he maintains Grant's devotion to family kept him from drinking to excess and sinking into debt.
Right.
Years later, after his resignation, Grant told John Eaton, vice of intemperance had not a little to do with my decision to resign.
Mm-hmm.
Grant's father, again believing his son's only potential for success was to be in the military, he tried to get the Secretary of War to rescind the resignation to no avail.
Damn, this dude's up there. Come on, man, my boy's better. Like, dude, even your boy says he's not.
He's not gonna survive at life if he's not in the military. Come on.
Well,
I have no faith in him. He'll never be president of the United States. Come on.
Right. At the very old age of 32.
It is.
Yeah, back then. 32 years old, no civilian vocation. Grant began to struggle through 7 financially lean years in poverty. He didn't know what to do with himself. His father, Jesse, initially offered Grant a position in the Galena, Illinois branch of tanneries business. He's like, you can only come work with me, though, on a condition that Julie and the children, for economic reasons, stay with their parents in Missouri. He didn't like them. Or at Grant's in Kentucky.
Assuming his house in Kentucky.
Grant's house. So he didn't want them. He didn't want no kids or wife there, huh? So this is the
probably because
this is the bachelor pad.
Barely made any money.
Right. Ulysses and Julia were adamantly opposed to another separation, which, why would you? And they said, nah, we're good. 1854, Grant farmed on his brother-in-law's property near St. Louis, using slaves owned by Julia's father, but that farm did not succeed.
Yes, it's 2 years later, Grant and family moved to a section of his father-in-law's farm to give his family a home. They built a house he called Hard Scrabble.
Oh.
Julia hated the rustic house, which she described as an unattractive cabin. Shut up.
Jeez.
During this time, Grant also acquired a slave from Julia's father, who was a 35-year-old man named William Jones.
Okay.
Having met with no success farming, the Grants left the farm when their fourth and final child was born in 1858. Grant then freed a slave in 1859 instead of selling him, at a time when slaves commanded a high price and Grant needed money badly.
Oh, that's perfect.
He was also chastised. Yeah, she didn't say it. He was also chastised by his wife's dad because instead of just letting his slave do the work, he would be out there like
Right, he
fucking
would be doing
digging
it.
and shit with
Right.
him and side by side. And his dad's like, "What are you
Like,
doing?
What are you doing? That's what he's for."
Right.
No, man. He's here to help against his will. For the next year, the family took a small house in St. Louis. He worked again without success with Julia's cousin, Harry Boggs, as a bill collector. How can you not be a bill collector? I guess. If they don't have the money, you can't collect them.
Right.
1860, Jesse offered him the job in his tannery in Galena, Illinois, again, without any conditions this time. Which Ulysses is like, finally,
Yeah,
that's
right.
all I ever wanted,
Don't know why
Daddy.
you couldn't do that before.
The leather shop, Grant and Perkins. They sold harnesses, saddles, and of course, other leather goods. They also purchased hides from farmers in the prosperous Galena area. Ulysses moved his family to Galena before that year ended. And he was like, damn right, let's go make some money, honey.
Well, although unopposed to slavery at the time, Grant kept his political opinions private and never endorsed any candidate running for public office before the Civil War.
Ooh,
His father-in-law, he was a prominent Democrat in Missouri,
makes sense.
a factor that helped derail Grant's bid to become county engineer in 1859, while his own father, he was an outspoken Republican.
Ooh.
In the 1856 election, Grant cast his first presidential vote ever for Democratic candidate James Buchanan,
Oh, wow.
saying he was really voting against Fremont, the Republican candidate.
Yeah, nobody wanted Fremont. That was a bad guy.
1860, he favored the Democratic presidential candidate Stephen Douglas over Abraham Lincoln,
Oh, wow.
and Lincoln over alternate Democratic candidate John Breckinridge.
Really?
Of course.
15th of April, after the Confederate attack on Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina, President Abe Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to put down secession.
This is for a lot of you that listened to our series for a while, especially with obviously these generals and stuff. You're going to hear a lot of the same stuff about what happened during the battles. But
you might have forgot.
some people might not have heard any of our stuff or just listen for Grant, so you gotta go with it.
Right. The town of Galena was very enthusiastic in support of the war and recognized in Grant the one local with broad military experience. They're like, this is you, bud. It's your chance.
You have to represent us.
Grant helped recruit a company of volunteers in Galena and accompanied it to Springfield, which was the state capital, where untrained units were assembling in great confusion. They're like, what the hell's going on? We're like, I don't know, man. Sponsored by his influential congressman, Elihu
Akbar.
Washburn. Grant was named by the governor, Richard Yates, to train volunteers. He's like, here you go, bud. Here you go. How do you want to get paid?
He indeed
Whiskey.
proved efficient and energetic in the training camps, but desired a field command. Yates appointed him as a colonel in the Illinois militia and gave him command of the undisciplined and rebellious 21st Illinois Infantry, June 17th.
Damn.
He went to Mexico, Missouri, guarding the Hannibal and St. Joseph Railroad from Confederate attack. July 31st, 1861, Lincoln appointed him as Brigadier General in the United States Volunteers.
Oh, shit.
September 1st, he was selected by Western Department Commander Major John Fremont. Oh, he was like, I voted against you, bitch.
Right.
To command the District of Southeast Missouri. He soon established his headquarters at Cairo, Illinois, where the Ohio River joins the Mississippi.
Smart.
His command was soon reorganized and renamed the District of Cairo.
And then it begins. Look at that. Take a look at the battles of Belmont, Fort Henry, and Fort Donelson, which we did all of these battles.
Obviously.
Grant's first Civil War battle occurred while he was in the command of the District of Cairo. The Confederate Army, stationed in Columbus under General Leonidas Polk, had violated Kentucky's military neutrality, which we've said multiple times. Grant took the initiative and seized Paducah, Kentucky on the 5th of September, 1861. He was ordered by commanding Union Major General John Fremont just to make demonstrations against the Confederates rather than attack Polk directly. Grant obeyed the order until President Lincoln discharged Fremont from active duty on the 2nd of November, 1861. He's like,
He's
wait.
like, you can't tell me what to do no more.
He's like, Fremont's gone? Charge! Charge!
Going on the offensive, Grant took 3,000 Union troops by boat and attacked the Confederate Army commanded by General Gideon Pillow, positioned at Camp Johnson in Belmont, Missouri, November 7th, 1861. Having initially pushed back the Confederate forces from Camp Johnson, Grant's undisciplined volunteers wildly celebrated rather than continuing. Pillow, who was given reinforcements by Polk from Columbus, he then forced the Union troops to make a hasty retreat.
Oh, here we go. Back in
Got to get your boys disciplined, man.
Ooh, although the battle was considered inconclusive and futile, Grant and his troops gained the confidence needed to continue on the offensive.
Feel like we can do it.
More importantly, old Lincoln, he took notice of Grant's willingness to fight. Grant,
He's like, somebody, finally.
Right. He then won approval from Major General Henry Halleck. Halleck said, go ahead and attack Confederate Fort Henry on the Tennessee River. Get that fort, baby. Embarking on Admiral Andrew Foote's naval flotilla, the expedition steamed south on the 3rd of February, 1862, with 2 divisions of 15,000 men. Oh.
During the winter, the river had risen and swamped some of the defenses of Fort Henry. Oh. Yeah. February 6, 1862, Admiral Foote's Union fleet consisted of ironclads and wooden ships bombarded Fort Henry as Grant's troops began the landing.
Damn.
Before Grant could attack, though, the fortress surrendered.
Damn right it did. I seen all that. Like, oh, shit.
2 Union naval officers entered the fort on a rowboat to accept the surrender. Although approximately 3,000 Confederates escaped east before, the fall of Fort Henry opened up the Union war effort in Tennessee and Alabama.
Yeah, this started...
And put old Grant's name on the map, baby.
This started the whole, we need all of Mississippi.
Yep.
River,
well, yeah,
river
got to get the Vicksburg and shit.
Man. After the fall of Fort Henry, Grant moved his army overland 12 miles east to capture another fort, which is Fort Donelson on the Cumberland River. Fantastic. Foote's naval fleet arrived on the 14th of February and immediately started a series of bombardments.
Started handing out Valentines.
Right. You shot me with your love.
You bombard me.
My heart is a fortress for your love.
That's funny.
Fort Donelson's water batteries effectively repulsed the naval fleet stealthily on February 15th, 1861. Confederate Brigadier General John Floyd ordered General Pillow to strike at Grant's Union forces encamped around the fort in order to establish an escape route through Nashville. He's like, we gotta get the hell out of here.
Yeah, Pillow's attack pushed McClernand's troops into a disorganized retreat eastward on the Nashville Road. However, the Confederate advance stalled. Grant was able to rally the Union troops to keep the Southerners from escaping. Confederate forces under General Simon Bolivar Buckner, they finally surrendered Fort Donelson February 16th. Grant's surrender demand to Buckner was popular throughout the Union as no terms except an unconditional and immediate surrender can be accepted.
Damn.
And that's why they called him Unconditional Surrender Grant.
Damn right.
President Abraham Lincoln promoted Grant to Major General Volunteers right after this.
I bet he did.
Still not regular army, though.
The surrender of Fort Donelson was a tremendous victory for the old Bluecoats. 12,000 Confederate soldiers had been captured, in addition to the bountiful arms inventory of the fort.
Bountiful arms.
However, old Ulysses now experienced serious difficulties with his superior in St. Louis, who was Major General Henry Halleck, who loved him not too long ago. Some writers believe that Halleck was personally or professionally jealous of Grant.
You see the rise of his popularity with Lincoln. Lincoln's probably talking about this Grant guy in the East over there. I mean, the West. And he's like...
Well, in any event, Halleck made various criticisms about Grant to Washington, even suggesting that Grant's performance was impaired by drinking. Oh, here we go. Slander, baby. Well,
with Washington's support, Halleck told Grant to remain at Fort Henry and give command of the next expedition up the Tennessee River to Charles Smith, who was newly nominated as Major General.
Wow.
Grant asked 3 times to be relieved from duty under Halleck. However, Halleck soon restored Grant to field command, perhaps in part because Lincoln intervened to inquire into Halleck's dissatisfaction with Grant.
Right.
Grant soon rejoined his forces, eventually known as the Army of Tennessee. That happened at Savannah, Tennessee. After the fall of Donelson, Grant became popularly known for smoking cigars, as many as 18 to 20 a day, because people kept sending them, and he's like, I have no choice now. I'm addicted. Thanks, guys.
Shit.
That ended his life.
That's a lot of cigars.
Literally why he died.
You ain't kidding, man. Holy shit. Let's take a look at the Battle of Shiloh. March 1862. Major General Henry Halleck ordered Grant's army to Tennessee. He wanted them to move southward up the Tennessee River to attack Confederate railroads. Halleck then ordered Major General Don Carlos Buell's Army of the Ohio to concentrate with Grant before implementing a planned attack on Confederate troops concentrated in Corinth, Mississippi. Buell, whose veteran army was only 90 miles east of Columbia, was hesitant in sending reinforcements, claiming swollen rivers were hindering progress, which is probably true. Union commanders Grant and then Brigadier General William T. Sherman, the informal commander of Pittsburgh Landing, they mistakenly assumed Confederate troops would not attack the Union Army, so there was no entrenchments. Oh. Why would you think that?
Well, mistakenly. April 6, 1862, the Confederates launched a preemptive full-force attack on Grant's troops in Shiloh.
Yeah, they did.
The objective was to destroy Grant's forces before being reinforced by Buell's army. Over 44,000 Confederate Army of Mississippi troops, led by Albert Sidney Johnston and P.G.T. Beauregard, they vigorously attacked 5 divisions of Grant's army, camped 9 miles north from Savannah, Tennessee, at Pittsburgh Landing.
Uh-oh.
Union Colonel Everett Peabody, upon his infantry discovering the oncoming Confederate assault, they were able to adequately warn the Union Army to form battle lines. Nonetheless, the Confederates, they were initially able to drive back the Union Army.
Ooh-wee. The Union soldiers left, however, under Brigadier Generals Benjamin Prentiss, W.H.L. Wallace, and James M. Tuttle. They bravely withstood determined Confederate assaults in a road pocket known as the Hornet's Nest.
Yeah, the old Hornet's Nest.
They did that for 7 hours before being forced to yield ground towards the Tennessee River. They tried. This gave the Bluecoats much needed time to be able to stabilize their line formations and gather reinforcements. Prentiss himself was taken prisoner and forced to surrender his division to the old rebels.
I mean, you gotta lose some casualties every once in a while.
And then you had W.H.L. Wallace mortally wounded. Grant, nursing a previous horse fall injury, drunk bastard, arrived from Savannah.
Drunk while horsebacking, man.
Arrived from Savannah, where both he and Sherman rallied the troops and staved off defeat.
Oh, Sherman, his buddy till the end. But although Grant's forces were battered, the Army of the Tennessee held strong compact positions with 50 artillery guns, while 2 federal gunboats fired at the Confederates.
Damn.
After receiving reinforcements from Buell and his own army, Grant had a total of 45,000 troops and launched a counteroffensive April 7th.
Damn.
Confederate General Johnston, he was killed in this battle on the first day of fighting.
Damn.
And the Confederate Army, now under Beauregard, was outnumbered, and they had to go back to Corinth, Mississippi.
Yep, old Shiloh.
Said, we lost this one, boys. This is like the first real one. They were like, this shit's real, dude.
Right. 23,746 casualties at Shiloh shocked both the Union and the Confederacy, whose combined totals exceeded casualties from all the United States' previous wars.
Crazy.
The Battle of Shiloh led to much criticism of Grant for leaving his army unprepared defensively. He was also falsely accused of being drunk. According to one account, Lincoln rejected suggestions to dismiss Grant, saying this, I can't spare this man. He fights. After Shiloh, General Halleck took the field personally and gathered a 120,000-man army at Pittsburgh Landing, including Grant's Army of Tennessee, Buell's Army of Ohio, and also added John Pope's Army of the Mississippi. Look at this guy.
He assigned Grant the role of second in command, with others in direct command of his divisions. Grant was upset over the situation and might have left his command, but his friend and fellow officer, William Sherman, he persuaded him to stay in Halleck's army.
Ooh.
He said, you'll move up. Just wait.
Right.
After capturing Corinth, Mississippi, the 120,000-man army was disbanded. Halleck, he was promoted to general-in-chief of the Union Army, then transferred east to Washington, D.C. Grant, he then resumed immediate control of the Army of Tennessee, and a year later, he goes and captures the Confederate stronghold of Vicksburg.
Sure in hell did.
Further cements his old legacy. July 2nd, 1862, Lincoln authorized African-American contrabands or fugitive slaves seeking refuge in the Union Army to be recruited. During the fall of 62, Grant made efforts to take care of wagon loads of black slave refugees in western Tennessee and northern Mississippi. November 13th, 1862, Grant placed Chaplain John Eaton of the 27th Ohio Infantry in charge of the refugees. Eaton organized camps and put the refugees to work to bring in the fall corn and cotton crops on deserted plantations. Okay. Eaton proved to be a judicious and fair leader of the refugees, protecting them from Confederate marauders.
Well,
these are my property now.
Well, these refugees were not paid directly at this time, though. Money was allocated and spent on them reasonably for their benefit. Basically, they're saying
food, clothing.
They weren't smart enough to handle their own money, their own finances.
Food, clothing, and housing. Living.
Eventually, these African Americans were recruited into the Union Army, paid directly to cut wood to fuel the Union steamers. With the resultant income of the refugees were able to feed and clothe their families themselves. Look at that shit. This would be the beginnings of what would be known as the Freedmen's Bureau during Reconstruction. Similar efforts to incorporate African Americans into the Union War were made on the Atlantic coast. Okay.
Many Union political conservatives in Illinois, however, they were against and blocked the influx of African Americans into their state. January 1st.
So Illinois, huh? A Union state.
January 1st, 1863, President Lincoln did the Emancipation Proclamation, freed the slaves in the states and parts of states in rebellion. Thereafter, the Union recruited both former slaves and other blacks to fight against the Confederacy in new regiments of the Union Army known as the United States Colored Troops.
Did they have to be known that? That's the shitty part. That's why I always laugh and everybody's like, it was about slavery. Okay, so why were the black troops in the Union Army called the colored troops then, you stupid fuckers? They should have just been Union troops. Moving on to the Battle of Vicksburg, which we did. You guys can go back, take a look at that. Resolved to take control of the Mississippi River from the Confederacy, old Lincoln and the Union Army and the Navy. They were determined to take the Confederate stronghold Vicksburg in 1862. And they have to wait a year. Lincoln authorized Major General John McClernand, a war Democrat politician. He's like, hey, get some troops recruited. We're going to call them the 13th Corps and organize an expedition against Vicksburg. Can you do that? A personal rivalry developed between Grant and McClernand, though, on who will get credit for taking Vicksburg. Well, I don't think Grant would get credit, right? The Vicksburg campaign started in December of 1862, lasted 6 months before the Union Army finally took the fortress.
Sure did. The campaign combined many important naval operations, troop maneuvers, failed initiatives, and was divided into 2 stages. Prize of capturing Vicksburg would ensure either McClernand or Grant's success, and would divide the Confederacy into eastern and western parts. At the opening of the campaign, Grant attempted to capture Vicksburg overland from the northeast. Confederate Generals Nathan B. Forrest and Earl Van Dorn, they thwarted the Union Army advance by raiding Union supplies.
Okay.
A related direct assault riverine expedition then failed when Major General William T. Sherman was repulsed by Confederates at the Battle of Chickasaw Bayou.
Yep, Chickasaw Bayou. January 1863, McClernand and Sherman, they combined the 13th and the 13th and 15th Corps, the Army of the Mississippi, and they defeated the Confederates at Arkansas Post. Grant, he made 5 attempts to capture Vicksburg by water. All failed. With the Union impatient for a victory, March of 1863, the second stage to capture Vicksburg began, and Lincoln right on Grant's ass, like, hey, we need something here, bud. I need to get reelected. Grant, he marched his troops down the west side of the Mississippi River, crossed over at Bruinsburg. Admiral David D. Porter's Navy ships had previously made a run past Vicksburg's batteries on the 16th of April, enabling Union troops to be transported to the east side of the river. Look at that. Good for you guys.
The crossing succeeded due to Grant's elaborate series of demonstrations and diversions that masked his intended movements from the Confederates.
Oh.
After the crossing, Grant maneuvered his army inland, and after a series of battles, the state capital of Jackson, Mississippi, was captured. Confederate General John Pemberton was defeated by Grant's forces at the battles of Champion Hill and Black River Bridge, then retreated to the Vicksburg fortress. After 2 unsuccessful and costly assaults on Vicksburg, Grant said, you know what? We're going to settle in for a siege.
He loves his sieges, and they usually work out. Pemberton, unable to combine forces with the army of Joseph Johnston, which was hovering in central Mississippi, he said, you know what? We're going to surrender this fort July 4th, 1863. He said, here you go, Grant. The capture of Vicksburg was a turning point for the Union war effort. The surrender of Vicksburg and the defeat of Confederate General Robert E. Lee at Gettysburg were stinging defeats for the old Confederacy, now split into 2 by the Union's domination of the Mississippi River. President Lincoln promoted Grant to the permanent rank of Major General in the regular army. Look at that.
Finally going to the regulars.
Vicksburg, it marked the second surrender of a Confederate army, which was the Buckner being the first, to Grant the year before.
Grant's the only one taking guys, man. Well, during the siege, Grant dismissed McClernand for publishing to the press a congratulatory order that seemed to claim it was McClernand's corps that was winning the campaign. McClernand appealed the dismissal to his personal friend, President Lincoln, but to no avail. He said, nah. Grant had ended the rivalry on his own terms.
Nice.
The Union Army had captured considerable Confederate artillery, small arms, and ammo. Total casualties, killed or wounded, for the final operation against Vicksburg started March 29, 1863, were 10,142 for the Union, 9,091 for the Confederacy.
Crazy. Although the victory at Vicksburg was a tremendous advance in the Union war effort, Grant's reputation did not escape criticism, as it always has and always will. During the initial campaign in December of 1862, Grant became very upset and angry over speculators and traders who inundated his department and violated rules about trading cotton in a militarized zone. You can't do that. As a result, Grant issued his notorious General Order Number 11 on December 17th, expelled all Jews who he believed were engaged in trade in his department, including their families as well. Damn. Wow. When protests erupted from the Jews and the non-Jews alike, President Lincoln rescinded the order on the 4th of January, 1863. However, the episode tarnished Grant's reputation. I bet.
Well, in addition to that, Grant was accused by Major General Charles Hamilton and William Counts for being a drunkard and gloriously drunk in February and March of 1863.
When there's only like one or two people saying it, but now you got a good handful or...
Yeah, but are they saying it
Right.
just because they know that he's got a reputation already?
True.
Well, Major General John McClernand was alleged to have promoted and secretly spread this rumor in the Union Army.
Fucking McClernand.
Both McClernand...
They need a duel.
Right. Both McClernand and Hamilton were seeking promotion in the Army at the time of these allegations. Cincinnati commercial editor Murat Halstead, he railed that our whole army of the Mississippi is being wasted by a foolish, drunken, stupid Grant.
Oh, my gosh.
Lincoln sent Charles Dana to keep a watchful eye.
Okay.
To save Grant from dismissal, Assistant Adjutant General John Rawlins, who was Grant's friend, he got him to take a pledge to not touch alcohol.
Let's take a look at General Order Number 11. During the Vicksburg campaign, Grant received numerous reports from General Sherman and others that highly visible Jewish merchants were trading gold for cotton and were routinely violating trade regulations in Grant's war district. When his own daddy, Jesse Grant, arrived at his headquarters with two prominent Jewish merchants requesting special permits to trade in cotton, Grant became very angry and ordered his daddy and his partners to leave on the next train going north.
Get the hell out of here.
And Daddy, I don't want to see you back here with those Jewish boys.
I believe Jewish merchants had used his father and were also playing a large role in the widespread cotton speculation. He issued the General Order Number 11 from his headquarters in Holly Springs, Mississippi, December 17th.
Wow.
Because of the generalized wording of the order, allegations of anti-Semitism were soon levied at Grant. The order stated in part, the Jews as a class violate in every regulation of trade established by the Treasury Department, and also the department orders are hereby expelled from the department, comprising areas of Tennessee, Mississippi, and Kentucky.
New York Times denounced the order as humiliating and a revival of the spirit of the medieval ages. Its editorial column called for the utter reprobation of Grant's order. After protests from Jewish leaders, the order was rescinded by Lincoln, like we said, 3rd of January, 1863. Grant initially maintained that a staff officer issued it in his name. It was suggested by General James Wilson that Grant may have issued the order in order to strike indirectly at the lot of relatives who were always trying to use him. For example, his daddy, Jesse, who was in the business with the Jewish traders, and perhaps struck instead at what he maliciously saw as their counterpart, opportunistic traders who were Jewish. I think he was just sick of the dirty, greedy sons of bitches. And I'm not saying the Jews, but I'm saying people like that.
Yeah, I guess. Bertram Korn, he suggests the order was part of a consistent pattern.
Oh.
He says this was not the first discriminatory order Grant had signed. He was firmly convinced of the Jews' guilt and was eager to use any means of ridding himself of them.
All right.
During the campaign of 1868, Grant, he admitted the order was his, but maintained it would never have been issued if it had not been telegraphed the moment it was penned, and without reflection. Okay.
Oh, wow.
The order, ostensibly in response to illegal cotton smuggling done with, has been described by one modern historian as the most blatant official episode of anti-Semitism in the 19th century American history.
Take a look at Chattanooga. Major General William Rosecrans. He was defeated at Chickamauga, September 1863. The Rebs, led by Braxton Bragg, besieged the Union Army of the Cumberland in Chattanooga. In response, Lincoln put Grant in charge of the new military division of the Mississippi. He wanted to break the siege at Chattanooga, making Grant the commander of all Western armies. Look at that shit. Grant, who immediately relieved Rosecrans from duty, personally went to Chattanooga to take control of the situation. He took 20,000 troops, commanded by Major General William Sherman, from the Army of Tennessee. Major General Joseph Hooker, he was ordered to Chattanooga, taking 15,000 troops from the Army of Potomac. This dude was coming strong.
Rations, they were running severely low for Cumberland, for the Army, and supply relief was necessary for a Union counteroffensive.
Right.
When Grant arrived at Chattanooga at the Union camp, he was informed of their plight and implemented a system known as the Cracker Line, which was devised by Major General George Thomas's chief engineer, William Baldy Smith.
Okay.
After Union Army seized Brown's Ferry, Hooker's troops and supplies were sent into the city, helping to feed the starving men and animals, and to prepare for an assault on the Confederate forces surrounding the city.
Right. 23rd of November, Grant launched his offensive on the Missionary Ridge, combining the forces of the Army of Cumberland, Army of Tennessee, and the Army of Potomac all into one. Major General Thomas, he took a minor high ground known as Orchard Knob, while Major General Sherman took strategic positions for an attack on Bragg's right on Missionary Ridge. 24th of November, heavy fog. Hooker captured Lookout Mountain, positioned his troops to attack Bragg's left at the Rossville. 25th of November, Grant ordered Thomas's army to Cumberland. He said, make a diversionary attack only to take the rifle pits on Missionary Ridge. Okay.
Well, however, after the soldiers took the rifle pits, they proceeded on their own initiative, without orders, to make a successful frontal assault straight up Missionary Ridge.
They did. You guys got to listen to that episode.
Bragg's army, routed and defeated, was in complete disarray from the frontal assault and forced to retreat to South Chickamauga Creek.
Right.
Although the valiant frontal assault was successful, Grant, he was initially upset because he did not give direct orders for the men to take Missionary Ridge. However, he's obviously going to be satisfied with the results. The victory at Missionary Ridge eliminated the last Confederate control of Mississippi, or Tennessee, and opened the door to an invasion of the Deep South.
Oh, the Deep South, baby.
Leading to Sherman's Atlanta campaign of 1864.
Look at that shit.
Casualties after the battle were 5,824 for the Union and 6,667 for Confederate armies. Okay. Get shit done.
Right. After the old rebel defeat at Chattanooga, President Lincoln promoted Grant to a special regular army rank, General-in-Chief, or Lieutenant General. That's authorized by the Congress on the 2nd of March, 1864. This rank had previously been awarded to two other times, to full rank to George Washington and a brevet rank to Winfield Scott. President Lincoln was reluctant to award the promotion until informed that Grant was not seeking to be a candidate in the presidential election of 1864. With the new rank, Grant moved his headquarters to the east and installed Major General Sherman as commander of the Western armies, which was probably one of his best decisions he made.
President Lincoln and Grant, they met together in Washington and devised total war plans that struck at the heart of the Confederacy. They included military, railroad, and economic infrastructures. No longer refugees, African Americans were now incorporated into the Union Army as trained soldiers, taking away the Confederacy's labor force as well. Two primary objectives in the plans were to defeat Robert E. Lee's Army of Virginia and Joseph Johnston's Army of Tennessee. So we got to get these two big boys out. Who would have thought Lee's would come first?
They would attack the Confederacy from multiple directions. Army of Potomac, led by George Meade, would attack Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. Benjamin Butler would attack south of Richmond from the James River. Sherman would attack Johnston's army in Georgia, which he did. And George Crook and William W. Averill were to destroy railroad supply lines in West Virginia. Nathaniel Banks was to capture Mobile, Alabama. Franz Sigel was to guard the Baltimore-Ohio Railroad and advance it in the Shenandoah Valley. Grant, he would command all the Union Army forces while in the field with Meade and the Army of Potomac.
April 12th, 1864, Confederate forces under Major General Nathan B. Forrest, they captured Fort Pillow and slaughtered Union African-American troops rather than keep them as prisoners. Lieutenant General Grant, he retaliated by ordering Union prisoner exchanges canceled until Union black soldiers were treated equally with white soldiers.
Oh, wow.
The Confederate government, they declined to do so.
Let's take a look at the Overland Campaign. May 4th, 1864. Grant began a series of battles with Robert E. Lee in the Northern Virginia Army, known as the Overland Campaign. We did something on that, if you guys want to take a look at it. First battle between Lee and Grant took place after the Army of the Potomac crossed the Rapidan River into an area of secondary growth trees and shrubs known as the Wilderness. Battle of the Wilderness, we did that too. Lee was able to use the protective undergrowth to counter Grant's superior troop strength. Union Major General Winfield Hancock's Second Corps was able to inflict heavy casualties and drive back the old Confederates, General A.P. Hill's Corps, 2 miles. However, Lee, he was able to drive back the Union advance with General James Longstreet's reserves. So like, come on, baby. Let's get these sons of bitch Longstreet.
The difficult, bloody, and costly battles lasted 2 days, May 5th and 6th, resulting in an advantage to neither side. Unlike Union generals who retreated after similar battles with Lee, Grant ignored any setbacks and continued to flank Lee's right, moving southward. The tremendous casualties for the Battle of the Wilderness were 17,666 for the Union, 11,125 for the Confederate armies.
Damn.
Good Lord.
Although the Wilderness Battle was costly for the old Bluecoats, Grant decided to move south, continue to fight with Lee. I mean, that's the only thing you can do. As the Army of Potomac moved southward from the Wilderness, Grant, on the 8th of May, He was forced into yet an even more desperate 14-day battle at Spotsylvania. Anticipating Grant's right flank move, he was able to position his army at Spotsylvania Courthouse before Grant and his army could even arrive. You guys remember that battle?
Well, at least he got to one courthouse before.
Right. The battle started on the 10th of May. Although Lee's army was located in an exposed rough arc known as the Muleshoe, his army resisted multiple assaults from Grant's army for the first 6 days of battle. The fiercest fight in the battle took place on a point known as Bloody Angle.
The old Bloody Angle. Well, rifles refused to fire due to the troops' gunpowder getting wet from rainy weather, and they were forced into a bloody hand-to-hand struggle similar to battles fought in ancient times. Both Confederates and Union soldiers were slaughtered, and men were piled on top of each other in their attempt to control the point. By May 21st, the fighting had finally stopped. Grant, he got 18,000 men lost, 3,000 been killed in this battle. Many talented Confederate officers were killed in the battle, with Lee's army significantly damaged, having a total of 10 to 13,000 casualties. Damn. Popular Union Major General John Sedgwick of the 6th Corps was killed in the battle by a sharpshooter and replaced by Major General Horatio Wright. During the fighting at Spotsylvania, Grant stated, "I will fight it on this line if it takes all summer."
This dude is just, he's locked in, baby.
He didn't care. He was winning to lose some damn troops, that's for sure.
Right. He was locked in and ready to roll. Finding he could not break Lee's line of defense at Spotsylvania, Grant turned southward and moved into North Anna River, which was a dozen miles closer to Richmond. An attempt was made by Grant to get Lee to fight out in the open by sending an individual 2nd Corps on the west bank of the Mattapony River. Rather than take the bait, Lee anticipated a second right flank movement by Grant and retreated to North Anna River himself in response to the Union 5th and 6th Corps withdrawing from Spotsylvania. During this time, many Confederate generals, including Lee, they were incapacitated due to illness or injury.
Well, Lee, he was sickened with dysentery. He was unable to take advantage of the opportunity to seize parts of the Army of the Potomac. After a series of inconclusive minor battles at North Anna, May 23rd and 24th, the Army of the Potomac withdrew 20 miles southeast to the important crossroads at Old Cold Harbor. From June 1st to the 3rd, Grant and Lee had fought each other at Cold Harbor with the heaviest Union casualties on the final day. Grant's ordered assault on June 3rd was disastrous and lopsided, with 6,000 Union casualties to Lee's only 1,500. Great.
And Lee kicked Grant's ass for a minute. After 12 days of fighting at Cold Harbor, casualties, 12,000 for Union, 2,500 for Confederacy.
Wow.
11th of June, 1864, Grant's army, they broke away completely from Robert E. Lee. And on the 12th of June, they secretly crossed the James River on a pontoon bridge, and they attacked the railroad junction at Petersburg. For a brief time, Lee had no idea where Grant and his army were.
100,000 men. Where'd they go? Among northern anti-war elements after the stalemate at Cold Harbor, Grant was castigated as the Butcher for having sustained high casualties without a decisive victory over Robert E. Lee.
Yeah, but he was weakening them down, man.
However, Grant was able to successfully eliminate Lee's offensive capacity after the overland campaign and pinned him in the trenches of Petersburg.
Sure did.
Grant himself, who regretted the assault on June 3rd at Cold Harbor as a bad mistake on his part, he was determined to keep casualties minimal thereafter. Grant's plan was to keep fighting, and Lincoln supported him, as did the Republican Party apparatus, speakers, and newspapers across the North.
Fantastic.
We got him now. Gotta just drive it home.
Without a Union military victory, Lincoln's presidential campaign of 1864 against former general and Democratic contender George McClellan might have been at risk. Major General Sherman was bogged down chasing Confederate General Joseph Johnston into a conclusive battle. Benjamin Butler, who was supposed to attack Confederate railroads south of Richmond, was trapped in the Bermuda Hundred. Sigel had failed to secure the Shenandoah Valley from the old Confederate invasion, and he was relieved from his duty.
The entire Union war effort seemed to be stalling, and the Union public was growing increasingly impatient. The Copperheads, an anti-war movement of the Northern Democrats, they advocated legal recognition of the Confederacy, immediate peace talks, and encouraged draft dodging and desertion.
Oh, wow.
Jeez. The Union war effort was at its weakest point in the summer of 1864, while leaving the Washington capital exposed to Confederate attack, of which it did get attacked. Well, basically.
Petersburg was a supply center for Northern Virginia, with 5 railroads meeting at one junction. Its capture meant the immediate downfall of Richmond. To protect Richmond and fight Grant at the battles of Wilderness, Spotsylvania, and Cold Harbor, Lee was forced to leave Petersburg with minimal troop protection. After crossing the James, the Army of the Potomac, without any resistance, marched towards Petersburg. After crossing the James, Grant rescued Butler from the Bermuda Hundred and sent the 18th Corps, led by Brigadier General William Baldy Smith. He said, "Go capture the weakly protected Petersburg, will ya?" Which was guarded by Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard.
Grant then established his new headquarters at City Point for the rest of the war. Union forces quickly attacked and overtook Petersburg outlying trenches June 15th. However, Smith inexplicably stopped fighting and waited until the following day, June 16th, to attack the city.
Crazy.
Which allowed Beauregard to concentrate reinforcements into secondary field work. Second Union attack on Petersburg started June 16th, lasted until the 18th, when Lee's veterans finally arrived to keep the Union away from taking the important railroad junction. Unable to break Petersburg defenses, guess what? Grant said, "Worked once, we'll do it again over here. We're going for a siege."
And he did that for almost
For
a year.
a long time.
Holy shit. Realizing that Washington was left unprotected due to Grant's siege of Petersburg, Lee detached a corps under the command of Lieutenant General Jubal Early, hoping it would force the Union Army to send forces to pursue him. If Early could capture Washington, the Civil War would not have ended, but the Confederates would have embarrassed the Union and deeply wounded Northern morale.
And Lincoln wouldn't have got reelected, that's for damn sure.
Right. I mean, you don't have a capital. Early, with 15,000 troops, marched north down the Shenandoah Valley, defeated Union Major General Lew Wallace at Monocacy.
Or Monocacy, yeah.
Yeah. Defeated Major General Lewis Wallace at Monocacy. And following the Battle of Fort Stevens, he reached the outskirts of Washington, causing great alarm.
Sure did.
Close as he'll get, though.
At Lincoln's urging, Grant dispatched the veteran Union 6th Corps at the parts of the 19th Corps, led by Horatio Wright, to the capital. With the Union 22nd Corps manning Washington's fortifications, Early was unable to take the city. Confederate Army's mere presence close to the capital was still an embarrassment.
It was.
At Petersburg, Grant blew up a section of Lee's trenches with gunpowder planted inside a huge mine. Yeah, the old crater. And the explosion dug a huge crater and opened a big gap in the Confederate line. And stupid guys just climbed in the crater and literally got shot like fish in a barrel. That's crazy.
Yeah, that was stupid.
Slow and chaotic, with troops milling around in the side of the crater. This allowed Lee to repulse the breakthrough.
Wow.
Yeah.
Despite the setback with the crater incident.
Yeah, we'll call it that.
Right. And a congressional investigation that followed, I bet there was, Grant was able to lock in Lee and the Army of Northern Virginia at Petersburg. Grant's Union siege at Petersburg allowed the Union war effort on other fronts to finally bear fruit, like Sherman. He's doing some damage.
We got this army. Stop doing nothing. You guys go wreak havoc on the rest of the fucking.
And
shit.
Sherman's like, "Will do. Atlanta, here I come, baby," because he took Atlanta on 2nd September 1864 and began his famous March to the Sea in November. Victories at Atlanta and Mobile Bay. Lincoln was reelected president. The war effort continued. 19th of October, after 3 battles, Philip Sheridan, Army of Shenandoah, defeated Early's army.
Yeah, bye,
Bye-bye, Jubal.
Sheridan and Sherman, they followed Lincoln and Grant's strategy of total war by destroying the economic infrastructure of the Shenandoah Valley and a large swath of Georgia and the Carolinas. They did. December 16th, Major General George Thomas beat Confederate General John Hood at Nashville. Grant, he continued for months to stretch the Petersburg siege line westward to capture the vital railroad lines that supplied Richmond, stretching Lee's defensive works thin. We can stretch, you guys can't.
March 1865, Grant invited Lincoln to visit his headquarters at City Point. By coincidence, Sherman, then campaigning in North Carolina, just so happened to visit City Point at that same time.
Isn't that swell?
This allowed for the war's only 3-way meeting of Lincoln, Grant, and Sherman. Wow. Which was memorialized in G.P.A. Healy's famous painting, The Peacemakers.
David Porter was there too, but I guess he's not important enough to do anything with.
Look at that shit. Grant continued to apply months of relentless military pressure at Petersburg on the Army of Virginia. Lee was forced to evacuate Richmond in April 1865.
Yep. After a 9-day retreat, during which Grant expertly maneuvered his armies to block off all paths of retreat, we know Lee surrendered his army at the Appomattox Courthouse April 9, 1865. Considered his greatest triumph, this was the 3rd time a Confederate army surrendered to Grant. There, Grant offered generous terms that did much to ease tensions between the armies and preserve some semblance of Southern pride, which was needed to reunite the warring sides.
Right.
Within a few weeks, the American Civil War was over, though minor actions continued until Kirby Smith finally surrendered his forces in the Trans-Mississippi June 2nd, 1865. Yep. That's the war for Grant.
Yep. 3 surrenders? I think that's pretty damn good.
3 of the largest as well.
Right. Grant was a very popular man in the United States after the Civil War. President Lincoln was assassinated in April of 1865. Grant became America's first 4-star general and would aid Congress, led by radicals, in their effort to reconstruct the South. He often disagreed with President Andrew Johnson's conservative approach during the Reconstruction era.
Yeah, it's probably the wrong guy to lead Reconstruction. So.
Yeah, Grant was looked on as a popular national leader who could mend the nation's wounds and bring in an era of peace.
This didn't sit well with old Johnny.
Nope.
Grant was able to oust the French from Mexico as the commanding general under Johnson, and also able to thwart the Fenian Brotherhood attempted to take over Canada. Irish Republicans, they tried to go out there and take over Canada, huh?
Oh, shit.
Well, Grant was also in charge of Indian campaigns on the western frontier. We'll get to this later, but when he was elected president, his terms were filled with federal corruption scandals and sectional violence over the constitutional citizenship rights of African Americans. Grant, as president, supported the efforts of Congress to protect the civil rights of African Americans, and was able for a few years to legally and militarily defeat the KKK.
Oh, wow. Grant, he was often viewed, as we said multiple times, as a drunkard, a butcher, who had won only because he waged a brutal war of attrition.
Hey, man, you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes.
Historian Edward Bonenkemper counters this view and says that Grant was the most successful general of the Civil War.
Clearly.
Noting that in the West, Grant drove the Confederates out of the Mississippi Valley through a series of battles and campaigns, including Fort Donelson, Vicksburg, and Chattanooga. Grant was brought back east and put in command of the Union Army. He was able to defeat Lee.
Yes, we know.
Right.
He's pretty successful, yes.
According to Bonenkemper, Grant's armies were more destructive than Confederate armies. Grant's Union armies in the West and the East that battled Confederate armies inflicted more casualties. A total of 190,760 Confederate versus 643,000 for the Union. A difference of 37,000.
All right. Now, April 14th, 1865, Grant attended a cabinet meeting in Washington. Lincoln invited him and his wife Julia to Ford's Theater, but they declined.
Yeah, good for him.
Because they already planned to travel to the home in Burlington and said, dude, I want to go home.
Or did he kill Lincoln?
Right. In a conspiracy. Oh, shit. That also targeted top cabinet members in one last effort to topple the Union. Lincoln, assassinated by Wilkes Booth at the theater and died the next morning.
Damn.
Many, including Grant himself, thought that Grant had been a target in the plot, and during the subsequent trial, the government tried to prove that Grant had been stalked by Booth's conspirator Michael O'Laughlin.
Oh, could they have done that?
Well, Edwin Stanton notified Grant of the president's death and summoned him to Washington. The Vice President Johnson sworn in as president April 15th. Grant, he was determined to work with Johnson, and he privately expressed every reason to hope in the new president's ability to run the government in its old channel. Not going to happen.
Let's take a look at his commanding generalship, 1865 to 1869. After the war, Grant spent 4 years as head of the United States Army in peacetime. After defeating Lee in the Confederacy, Grant was the most popular man in the whole country. May of 1865.
Had to piss old Johnson off.
Right. In May of 1865, Union League of Philadelphia purchased the Grants a house in that city, but Grant's work was in Washington.
Clearly.
He attempted to commute for a time and then return on the weekends. But he and Julia decided, we're just going to stay in Washington, boys. They were secured in a place in Georgetown Heights, while Grant instructed Elihu Washburn that politically his legal residence remained in Galena, Illinois. I get it.
Right.
I get it.
In the spring of 1865, Grant made an appearance at Cooper Union in New York. The New York Times described the reception for the war hero. He said, the enhanced and bewildered multitude trembled with extraordinary delight.
Ooh.
Further travels that summer, with repeated enthusiastic receptions, took the Grants to Albany and back to Galena and throughout Illinois to Ohio. July 25th, 1866, the Congress promoted Grant to the newly created rank of General of the Army of the United States.
Look at that. Grant was the most popular man in the country when Johnson, when Johnson was at the loggerheads with the Congress over Reconstruction. He took his case to the people with his infamous swing around the circle throughout the country, and he sought to capitalize on Grant's popularity by having Grant travel with him.
Might as well.
Grant, wishing to appear loyal, agreed to accompany Johnson. However, he confided in his wife that he thought Johnson's speeches were a national disgrace. Oh, wow. Grant continued his efforts to appear loyal while not alienating Republican legislators essential to his future.
He knew he was going to run for president, though. At the same time, Johnson also suspected Grant to be a political candidate in the 1968 presidential election and decided to replace Secretary of War Stanton with Grant or Sherman. Grant discussed the matter with Sherman and initially convinced him to avoid the politically troubled president.
Right.
Johnson then sent Grant on a fact-finding tour of the South, after which he filed a report recommending continuation of the Freedmen's Bureau, but opposed use of black troops and garrisons, which were still needed in the South for protection of both races.
He also warned of threats by disaffected poor people, black and white, and recommended that local decision-making be entrusted only by thinking men.
Yeah, we don't want to hear what these poor people got to say.
By which he was thought to have men of property.
Right, people that had standing.
Right. In this respect, Grant's initial Reconstruction policy aligned with Johnson's policy of pardoning established Southern leaders and restoring them to their positions. Like, dude, we need them there because he's stupid.
Some of these guys were actually good at what they did.
Right.
They just, were treasonous for a minute.
Right. These disaffected poor people.
Right. Come on.
He joined Johnson in arguing that Congress should allow congressional representatives from the South to be seated once again.
Might as well. All right. Well, let's take a look at his dealings with Mexico and Canada as general. He immediately had to contend with the Maximilian of Mexico and the French army, which had taken over Mexico under the authority of Napoleon III. Most Americans felt this to be a violation of the Monroe Doctrine. Johnson, he told Grant to put military pressure on the French to leave Mexico by sending 50 G's worth of troops to the Texas border under Sheridan. Grant told Sheridan to do whatever it took to get Maximilian to abdicate and the French army to get out. Sheridan, he sent Benito Juarez, who was the ousted leader of Mexico, 60,000 U.S. rifles in aid in an effort to defeat Maximilian. Yeah. Damn, he sent the former president, the leader, said, you go lead your men and get your country back, buddy.
Like, we can easily come and take it, and you won't have nothing. Right. We're giving you a chance to do it, bud. By 1866, the French army completely withdrew from Mexico. Maximilian was executed by Juarez in 1867. In a cabinet.
Maximilian wasn't even French. If I remember, this dude's freaking German.
Austrian.
Yeah, Austrian. Yeah,
pretty much. In a cabinet meeting, Johnson suggested that Grant be assigned to the Mexican frontier.
Good Lord, that's worse than sending Lincoln to Oregon.
Right. This was a way of removing him from the political mainstream.
Yeah, you think?
Grant immediately recognized the nature of his proposal. He's like, hell no.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Sorry, bud. I mean, I'm all for help and everything else, but I'm not going there. As a compromise, Grant sent Sherman.
He said, Sherman, my boy.
who is now promoted to lieutenant general. He said, go on, Sherman. Take my place, baby. After the war...
He said, I'll make it up to you when I get president.
Right. After the Civil War, thousands of Irish veterans joined the Fenian Brotherhood with the intention of invading and holding Canada in exchange for Irish independence.
Damn.
Oh, wow.
June 1866, Johnson sent Grant to Buffalo to assess the situation. He ordered the Canada-U.S. border closed to prevent Fenian soldiers from crossing over at Fort Erie and that more weapons be confiscated. June of 1866, the United States Army arrested 700 Fenian troops at Buffalo, and the Fenians gave up their attempt to invade Canada. Like, damn, they got 700 of us. We got to go.
That's it, guys. We tried. Grant, as commanding general, inherited the Indian Wars.
Yeah, it's about 80 other generals did, too.
These wars were happening hot around America, but especially in the plains, as the United States continued westward expansion. That's what they called it. After the Civil War ended in 1865, Grant turned his attention to the neglected American western frontier. One of these plains wars, known as the Red Cloud's War, started in July of 1866. It was led by Sioux Chief Red Cloud. To end hostilities, Grant offered forts on the Powder River to be abandoned and for General William Sherman to make a peace treaty with the Sioux. As a result, Red Cloud signed the Fort Laramie Treaty in 1868, successfully negotiated by Sherman himself.
Yep. November 1865, Johnson sent Grant on a fact-finding mission to the South, like we said. And that's where he recommended the continuation of the Freedmen's Bureau and advised against the use of black troops in garrisons. Grant did not believe the people of the South were ready for self-rule and that both whites and blacks in the South required protection by the federal government. Concerned 4 years of war led to a diminished respect for civil authorities. Grant concluded the Army should continue their presence to maintain order. Yeah.
Very kind of smart.
Can't leave them up to their own devices yet.
Instantly. Hey, war's over. Do what you guys can do. As well as Grant believing that former leaders should be put back into their offices, he also believed that former Confederates should be re-enlisted into the United States military.
Yeah, why not?
He personally intervened on behalf of Lee, who had been indicted for treason along with other Confederate generals, keeping Lee safe from prosecution, saving the nation from opening up old war wounds as well. In January of 1866, Grant authorized the removal of cases against Union officers to federal courts and Freedmen's Bureau.
Yeah, there's a lot of Union officers getting in trouble for some stuff.
Yeah.
In the elections of 1866, an intra-party fight arose in Maryland when the mayor of Baltimore, who was a radical, appointed radical police commissioners who would be responsible for managing voter registration. Maryland's governor, a partisan of Johnson, he requested that federal troops intervene, which Grant initially considered inappropriate. To provide some manner of response, Grant met as a civilian with the opposing party heads, and with the use of the Army as an implicit threat, he was able to facilitate a settlement. Said, we'll come in here, but not the way you like, so you better get the shit settled.
Grant's service as Union General caused him to join the Republican Party and force him to consider African Americans as both humans and soldiers.
Damn it, I'm going to be forced to do this?
Son of a bitch. Johnson,
That's a stupid way of saying that. I mean,
right. Johnson, a robust Democrat, sided with white supremacists and openly held racist views, believing blacks were inferior and that the country and government were for white men. Yeah, Johnson was a piece of shit.
Clearly.
Johnson favored a lenient approach to Reconstruction, calling for an immediate return of the former Confederate states into the Union without any guarantee of African American civil rights.
Does this guy not learn for the last 4 years? Holy moly. The radical Republican-controlled Congress opposed the idea and refused to admit congressmen from the former Confederate state. Congress, over Johnson's vetoes, renewed the Freedmen's Bureau and passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866. Spent 1 million of those.
Right.
With Johnson at war with Congress, Grant and Johnson, they found themselves in quiet conflict over Reconstruction reinforcement, while Grant, as a soldier, was determined to remain loyal to his commander-in-chief.
Right.
Needing Grant's popularity, Johnson took Grant on his swing around the circle tour, speaking out against congressional Reconstruction.
Enthusiastic cheering for Grant interrupting Johnson's speeches caused the relationship between Johnson and Grant to cool.
Yeah, he was like, why am I taking this guy here?
Right.
He's overshadowing
dude,
me.
I guarantee he wanted to kill him all the time.
Probably.
Grant believed that Johnson was purposely agitating conservative opinion to defy congressional Reconstruction, privately calling Johnson's speeches a national disgrace, like we said earlier. Concerned that Johnson's differences with Congress would cause a renewed insurrection, Grant ordered Southern arsenals to ship arms north to prevent their capture by Southern state governments.
Damn.
Holy shit. Having returned to Washington, Johnson attempted to send Grant on a mission to Mexico. As we said earlier, he said no, he sent Sherman instead.
March 2nd, 1867, overriding Johnson's veto, making unprecedented use of the power of the military, Congress passed the first of 3 Reconstruction Acts, which divided the southern states into 5 military districts. Transitional state governments in each district were to be led by military governors to ensure that African Americans' newly granted constitutional and congressional rights were protected. Grant, who was to select the general to govern each district, preferred the will of Congress through the enforcement of congressional Reconstruction, but at the outset opposed the use of military.
Right.
He said, we've already been in these guys' states and stuff militarily for the last 4 years, dude.
Nevertheless, Grant adapted, and by complying with the acts and instructing his subordinates to do likewise, he further alienated Johnson. For example, Grant authorized Sheridan to remove public officials in Louisiana who were against congressional Reconstruction. Sheridan's aggressive methods to register freedmen met with Johnson's disapproval, and the president sought his removal.
All right. Well, I'll try to get rid of Sheridan.
This guy's a piece of shit. Grant perceptively stayed the middle course and recommended a rebuke, but not a dismissal.
Right. Well, protecting Grant, Congress passed the Command of the Army Act, which was attached to an Army appropriation bill, preventing his removal or relocation and forcing Johnson to pass orders through Grant, who was the general chief. Ooh. Republicans gained majorities in all 11 states, and African Americans were elected to Congress and high state offices as well. Grant hoped that Reconstruction Acts would help pacify the South. The Army, they conducted new elections for constitutional conventions in the ex-Confederate states.
Look at that shit. They registered blacks to vote, and in many places they prevented white men who supported the Confederacy, as set out in the disenfranchisement clause of the 14th Amendment. Throughout the Reconstruction period, more than 1,500 African Americans were elected to political office, while Grant and the military protected their rights initially by overturning the black codes in 1867. Congressional Reconstruction finally ended with the Compromise of 1877 and the complete withdrawal of military troops from southern states.
You guys are on your own. See what you can do.
Yep.
Nothing. Let's take a look at Johnson's impeachment and how this is going to affect old Grant. Johnson and Grant's different civilian and military backgrounds would cause a collision course over policy. August 12, 1867, during a Senate recess, President Johnson suspended Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, who was a Lincoln appointee who sympathized with congressional Reconstruction. Grant himself respected Stanton and sided with him on Reconstruction, while both shared a dismay for Johnson. To keep Grant under control as a potential political rival, Johnson asked him to take the post. Grant recommended against the move in light of the Tenure of Office Act, which required Senate approval for cabinet removals anyways.
Ooh, look at that shit. Look at Johnson.
And it would never happen.
Wow. Well, Johnson, he believed that the act did not apply to officers appointed by the previous president, and he forced the issue by making Grant an interim appointee on the same day.
Damn, dude.
This guy is, wow. Grant agreed to accept the post temporarily, and Stanton vacated the office until the Senate reconvened. 10th of January, 1868, the Senate Committee on Military Affairs voted to recommend reinstatement of Stanton. The following day, Grant consulted with his staff and rereading the Tenure Office Act. He learned that if he kept the office, he would be subject to a $10,000 fine and 5 years in prison. Whoa.
Damn. He said you can't just take the office.
Wow.
Well, Grant hurried to the White House and told Johnson he was not going to break federal law. Johnson, he told Grant he would pay the fine and go to prison in Grant's place.
Oh, whatever.
But Grant found Johnson's answer preposterous. Stupid.
Right.
Monday, January 13th, the Senate voted to reinstate Stanton to office 35-6.
Wow.
The following morning, Grant locked up his War Department office and gave the key to Assistant Adjutant General Edward Townsend. 1 hour later, when Stanton arrived at the War Department office, Townsend gave Stanton the key, witnessed by welcoming onlookers.
Fantastic.
Grant was like, you make sure he gets this damn key, because I ain't going to prison.
Son of a bitch. Johnson. This incurred Johnson's wrath even more. At a cabinet meeting immediately afterward, Johnson accused Grant of breaking his promise to remain Secretary of War. Grant disputed that he had ever made such a promise, although cabinet members later testified he had done so. Newspapers friendly to Johnson published a series of articles to discredit Grant over returning the War Department to Stanton, stating that Grant had been deceptive in the matter.
Oh, fuck off. Well, the public insult infuriated Grant, and he defended himself in an angry letter to Johnson, after which the two men were confirmed foes.
Oh.
When Grant's statement became public, it increased his popularity among radical Republicans, and he emerged from the controversy unscathed. Although Grant favored Johnson's impeachment, he took no active role in the impeachment proceedings, which were fueled in part by Johnson's removal of Stanton. Johnson barely survived, and none of the other Republican leaders directly involved benefited politically in their unsuccessful attempt to remove the president.
Ooh.
And this is where next episode we'll go to the 1868 election, because it's right around the corner after this. And Johnson not going to survive with that, because, yeah, we're going to start off next episode with the campaign. And obviously we'll get into Grant's presidency, his legacy, all that stuff, his later life, and he literally goes broke at the end of his life. I don't know. I don't understand how this happens, but we'll get to it and how it happened. So that'll be next week. That's Ulysses S. Grant, the greatest president who ever lived. So we'll go with that. We'll get out of here because this is a long one already, and we'll see you next week for the presidency of old U.S. Grant. So we'll see you then. More Battles of the American Civil War, Behind the Battles, Where Are the Month of Michiganders?
Bang, bang.